Good morning, my lovely little ghosts, and welcome to the Dark Orchard. I'm Laura, and today I'm talking about sewing patterns. As I said in my intro, today I'm talking about sewing patterns. More specifically, this is part 1. If you'd like to see more than just a part 1, let me know. But in this part 1 that we're calling a part 1 for now, possibly just a standalone video, but calling a part 1 for now, in this video, I'm going to show you how to find your size, read a pattern, and cut a pattern. So without further delay, let's get started. So the pattern that I'm going to be using today for my example pattern is actually a simplicity pattern, and it is a brand new Halloween simplicity pattern. In case you want to search up this pattern later, it is S8979, and I will post the link to this in the description. Before I get into the total details, let me talk a little bit about patterns and the difference between using a pattern and making your own or drafting. When I was taught to sew, I was not taught to sew with a pattern. I was taught to draft everything that I sew, which works out just fine for most things. It wasn't until I started to cosplay with a group that I was told you can't draft everything. And I was like, psh, I can draft anything. But then I realized it's a little harder to draft things like corsets and just certain accessories you almost need a pattern for. Patterns are also really super helpful if you're working by yourself. If you have someone to help you sew, drafting's a little bit easier. But if you have no one to help you, a pattern is like your helper. So what is a sewing pattern? A sewing pattern is basically the outline or the deconstructed part of an outfit. It could be a dress, it could be a coat, it could be absolutely anything that you put on your body. Even more recently, they've come out with specific cosplay patterns that even have armor patterns, but we won't get into any of that. Today, we're doing a simple dress pattern. So before you even go pattern shopping, the one thing that you need to do is measure yourself. I'm going to pop in a diagram here of the places that you need to measure and about where you need to measure on your body to do so. Those of you that have boobs, you need to measure at the highest part of your boob and go around, like if you wear a bra, it's going to go around where your bra strap goes. So basically just follow the line of your bra strap and find the highest point of your boobage. And that's going to give you your perfect measurement. How do you do that? Do I do that with a normal tape measure? No. You do it with a sewing tape measure, which you can find at Walmart for like $1. A lot of sewing kits you can get for less than $10, and they have so many useful things. This one was $10. Your Burning Obsession sticker not included. Inside of this one, it's all super nicely organized. You get a pair of sewing scissors, you get a pair of thread scissors, a lifesaver, which is a seam ripper. You don't want to lose this. You want to keep this where you can get to it because you're going to need it. I don't care how good you are, you're going to need it at least once per project. They also give you a tiny little pin cushion and some pins to get you started. Needles, thread, pins, safety pins, because sometimes no matter how good you sew something, you're going to need a safety pin. A needle threader in case you can't see to get it in the little needle eye. And just some standard black and white thread and a thimble. Thimbles are one of my favorite things ever, especially when you're doing embroidery or hand sewing, because they protect your little fingers and they also protect your fingernails, because you will try to push that needle in with your thumbnail if you're not wearing a thimble. Thimbles are just as important as any of the rest of this. Oh, and another really awesome thing, they also include a white or blue pencil that's like a chalk pencil, and it rubs off as you work, so you can mark places for your patterns or mark different adjustments and then cut along those lines instead of your pattern lines. So if you don't already have a sewing kit, look for something like this because it's so super useful. You can just fold it up like a purse, put a Your Brand New Obsession sticker on it, and make it your own. But what we're looking for right now is the tape measure. Measures in inches and centimeters. You're most likely going to be wanting to use inches because that's what sewing patterns use. I'm going to attempt to sit up on my knees and show you how the bust should be measured. So let's see how that goes. You want to make sure that it's not turned around and not over close. You don't want to do this over close normally. where this little metal piece lines up is what your bust measurement is going to be. So mine is 44. Let's remember that number, 44. So the bust is one measurement that you want to take. If you don't have boobs, you just do the same thing but without the boob problem. So the second measurement that you'll need to take is your waistline. Your waistline is not where your pants sit. That is your hips. Your waistline is above that, about where your rib cage ends. When it says waistline, it is the smallest part of your waist. So when you're measuring for your waistline, make sure that you're standing straight and then measure at the bottom of where your rib cage ends. You'll measure all the way around just like you did with the bust, and then you'll take down that measurement. And then the last measurement that you'll 100% need is your hips. Like I said before, your hips are further down about where your pants sit, but you want to make sure that you're getting your highest points. Basically, you're measuring your booty. You're measuring from the highest point on your booty all the way around. So you're just including everything from the highest point of the booty all the way around. That's your hip measurement. For me, this is my biggest measurement. I have a 50-inch hip, but I have a 44-inch bust. So altogether, I have a 44-inch bust, I have a 37-inch waistline, and I have a 50-inch hip. So my body just kind of goes like, whoop. Sometimes that can get tricky with patterns, but I'm about to show you about how to read the size on a pattern. So just for the sake of this pattern in this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you from my measurements, but you can always apply it to yours. So now that you have those numbers, what do you do next? Well, you go to the store and you buy your pattern, or you look up a pattern online. The way that you find your size on a pattern is super easy. And actually, I'm going to go grab a different brand pattern just so you can see where it is on different things. Okay, my example is Simplicity, so I also grabbed a Butterick and a McCall's pattern. Simplicity first. The way to find your size on a Simplicity pattern is to look on the back. So, not the side with the pictures, but the side with all the words that look really intimidating. And you can see right here it says body measurements. And there are the 3 things that we measured. So bust, waist, and hip. If you recall, I said that my bust was 44. Okay, so my waist is 37, so that's right too. But then my hip is a 50. As you can see, it says hip should be 48, not 50, but that's okay because it's a flowy skirt and the skirt's just going to be a little bit higher, so I'll have to adjust the hem. It's the only difference. That's the only thing that you have to keep in mind when you're making a skirt and your pattern might not add up. And I actually, when cutting the skirt, I might even go to the next size up. Since this one actually has a next size up, I might would cut the skirt part at that size instead of the other size. So how do you find out the size? It's right underneath. Okay. So see where it says all of my measurements right here, the 44, 37, and 46, but we're actually going to go for 48. So the size that I would need to cut for the top would be 22. And then I'd have to remember the skirt, I need a 24. Do not get discouraged by the number on a pattern. I'm a 22, 24 in patterns, but I'm actually a medium large top, sometimes extra large, and I'm a size 18 jeans. Pattern sizes are different, and they're usually a larger number than what you actually wear. So just don't think about it. But that is how you find it on a Simplicity pattern. For both Butterick and McCall's, the sizes aren't on the back right here. They're actually in this little flap at the top of the envelope. So what you do, you open the envelope and you check it out right here. This is the Butterick. And see, there's those 3 measurements again. So bust, waist, and hip. And then over on this side, there's my 44, 37, and 46, which would need to be 50. So I would be a size 22 in Butterick as well. And then the McCall's pattern is basically exactly the same. It's in the little flap, and we have bust, waist, and hip. And then over here we have the measurements 44, 37, 46, so it would be a size 22. What I like to do once I find out my size is to circle it. So I just use a pencil and I circle what sizes that I've used so that when I go back and I have to use it for something else, I know that those are the sizes that it's cut for. So now we know how to take our measurements, we know how to find our size on the pattern. Where do we go from here? Well, once you know what you're making, you've selected your pattern, you've found your size, the next step is to buy your fabric. So how much fabric do you need? How do you know what you need to make this? I'll tell you. The pattern tells you everything you need. It's so helpful. You see I've marked these two sizes because these are the two that I'm going to need to use. So over on this side it says A, B, or C. And if you notice, the dress styles are labeled A, B, and C. These are the back views. These are the front views. And you can see the tiny little letters. This one's A, this one's B, and this one's C. Let's just say I want to make C. I would flip my pattern over and I would look for C. So this says C, this is the lining for C. So for the lining, I would need this amount. 5/8 of a yard for the lining. This stuff is for A, so we're going to keep going down. That's for B, so we want to look at C. And when I go over here, both sizes require 2 yards for the actual dress, and both sizes also require 5/8 yards for the contrasting front, the back band, and the neck strap. So altogether, you would need 2 yards of whatever color you want your main dress to be, and then 5/8 yards of the contrasting color, which for C would be your 2 yards of this color, and then your 5/8 for this color. And then if you notice, down here in the box for C, it also says interfacing. And for interfacing, you will need 3/8 yards of lightweight fusible interfacing. Interfacing can be tricky, but there's a whole panel just for interfacing, and it tells you what it is, what the price is. If you guys would like for me to do like a fabric store walkthrough and show you how to find the prices and how to do the yardage and stuff, let me know and I'll totally do that. Interfacing is sort of like a tissue thin, most of the time tissue thin, kind of fabric that you put between your lining and your fabric. It usually gives it a bit of a stiffness or gives it its shape. So interfacing is super important to a lot of things. And when you're making things, that's what depends on how heavy or how light, meaning how thick or how thin the interfacing needs to be. When it says fusible, that just means iron on. It means it needs to bond with the fabric. So do you just use any kind of fabric with the pattern? Does any kind of fabric work? Not always. The way to know if your fabric choice is going to work with that pattern, you can always check on the pattern on the very top. See right at the top, it says fabrics, and then for A, you need a fabric that has a bordered bottom. For B and C, they suggest cottons or satins, so it doesn't need to be stretchy. They also suggest that you use taffeta for the yoke and the sleeve or some sort of lace. So now, is fabric all we need? No. To find out the other things that you need, you just need to look under the Fabrics tab on your pattern, and you'll find a little section that says Notions. That's going to tell you all the bits, bobbles, and doodads that you need to complete your dress or other thing that you're making. That is right here. So for everything, you need thread and 1 16-inch zipper. Then specifically for C, you need 1 1/2 inch wide button. And if you're going to a fabric store or to Walmart, if your Walmart still has a fabric section, those will be easily accessible in the same location as the fabric. So we know how to take our measurements, we know how to find our size on a pattern and pick a pattern. Again, if you'd like for me to actually take you to a fabric shop and show you where to find patterns, how to find your number of the pattern, and all of that jazz, just let me know down in the comments. I'll be more than happy to show you the ropes. So what's the next step? You've bought your pattern, you've bought your fabric, now what? Well, first off, there are things called pattern sales. At Joann's specifically, they have $1, $2, and $5 pattern sales. Never buy a pattern full price. Believe me, you don't want to buy a pattern full price. This pattern is regular price $20.95. $20.95. That's insane. When I've paid $1 for this same pattern because I waited for a simplicity pattern sale. If you have a Joann's nearby, sign up for the Joann's newsletters and sign up for the Joann's coupons. You can get them on an app, on your phone, through an email, lots of places. But those weekly ads will tell you when there are pattern sales, and then you can just snatch them all up. Paying full price for a pattern is just like unheard of for me. I think the most I've ever paid for a pattern after I learned about pattern sales was like $5. There are some more expensive patterns such as Vogue or Berta, and they rarely go on sale, but when they do, they have $5 sales. So you can still get the really expensive, expensive patterns for cheap. So say you've bought your pattern, you've bought your fabric, you've bought all your notions and your interfacing, and it's all laying out on the floor in front of you, and you're going, what now? Well, you're gonna want to cut your pattern. It can seem really daunting, especially if your pattern's really thick. But don't worry. It's step by step. It's easy. It's something you learned in grade school. I'll show you what I mean. When you open up your envelope, you'll have two things inside. The first is going to be your instruction sheet. I love these because they give me a template so that I can draw out the design and then alter it, because even if I use a pattern, I always alter it to what my vision is instead of the exact copy of the pattern. So this gives me a brief picture outline of what they're going for so that I can build onto it on a separate sheet of paper and figure things out. But we're not going on that today. We're just going simple, following the pattern exactly. So you get these really nice images of the front of the dress and the back of the dress. It's labeled, it's got the pattern company and the pattern name here. And then your dresses front and back, just so you know exactly what it's supposed to look like. And then the other thing is going to be your pattern pieces. They come folded up and uncut. Once you start cutting your pattern pieces, it's going to be really hard to stuff them back into that envelope. So what I do instead is I get a gallon baggie. I put the envelope in, just like that, so you can see it through it. And then I'll take the instruction sheet, put it with the simplicity and everything facing outward. And then as I'm cutting the pieces, I'll put them in between. So it'll look something like this, but really bunched up and messy, because pattern pieces you have to fold and they get a little messy. At least that way you'll have it all in the same bag and you won't lose it. Good rule of thumb is once you take your pins out of your pattern piece and have everything pinned together the way it's supposed to be sewn, put those pieces back in your baggie so you don't lose them. But for right now, I'm going to show you just how you know what to cut, where, and why. So when you fold these out, they're going to be huge, and you're going to be like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, your brain's just going to go into overdrive, and you're going to be like, what have I gotten myself into? Don't worry about it. It's like a puzzle. Patterns are like adult grade school. So just breathe. You're in art class. You're in grade school art class, and you're about to have a lot of fun. So you want to grab a pair of scissors. If you have your kit, you can always use your thread scissors. Never, ever, ever use your fabric scissors. Those are going to be the big scissors. They're sharp, and you don't want to use them for anything. You want to just use them for fabric, because if you use them on paper, they'll get dull. And then when you try to use them on fabric again, they're not going to cut and they're going to snag your fabric. And it's all going to look really bad. So your smaller pair of scissors is what you use to cut patterns. Or buy you a pair of big scissors to cut your patterns with and label them specifically for patterns. But never use your fabric scissors to cut patterns or paper or anything that isn't fabric. You want to unfold it. Most likely your pattern is going to be in 1, 2, maybe even 5 different sheets, depending on how many pieces that you need for your outfit. It's okay. Just take them one at a time. So once you have it all unfolded and you've got all this tissue paper like stuff in front of you, what do? What is all this? It just looks like a bunch of markings and stuff. It all has a purpose, and I'll show you. Because this can get really in the way, I'm going to cut out a couple of pieces and just show you from that. So I'm just going to cut this into another section so you can kind of get an idea without having this giant sheet of paper in front of me. So, okay, this will be a lot easier for you to see and understand. I just cut out 2 different pieces. I kept them on a sheet so you can kind of get the idea. Just imagine that your sheet came out like this. That looks scary, right? That looks like algebra or something. Do not fear. This is just a pattern piece, and once you get the hang of it, you'll just get the hang of it. The beautiful thing about pattern pieces is that they're so self-explanatory. If you refer back to your instructions, there's another page right across from the pictures, or underneath the pictures, depending on how your pattern is laid out. You will get all of these different weird shapes. And all of the weird shapes have numbers on them, and the numbers correspond with a list. See all the weird shapes? All these weird shapes, and then they correspond with a number down here. So for C, I will need, this is for A, B, and C, so I'll need number 1. I'll need number 2, 3, 4, 5 says it's only for A and B. Since I'm making C, I don't need 5 or 6. The 7 is just for A, but I do need 8, 9, 10. Neck binding is just for B, so I don't need that. Don't need 12, but I do need 13 and 14. And then the one that's in the crease down here, that also says C, so I will need 15 as well. So once you know your numbers, you're going to go back to your pattern page. You're going to say, oh, there's number 1. Simplicity number 1. And then under here, it even tells you it's the bodice front, and it's for A, B, and C. Since I'm doing C, I'm going to cut this piece out. So how do you know how to cut it? That's where your sizing comes in. Just like in grade school when you were taught to cut along the line, that's what you're going to do now. So here on number 1, you get all of these wonky lines. And on the lines, there are these numbers. Where's my finger? Okay. On the lines, there's a number. So 24, 22. 22 was my bodice size. So I'm going to cut along this second line. Not the first line, because that's 24, but this second line. I'm just going to follow 22 all the way around. If it's a solid line, like this one, you just cut that for all sizes. But for all the ones that have other lines, you just follow along the line and cut 22. Cutting a pattern can take some time, so my suggestion is throw on the Andy Show, throw on some Your Brand New Obsession music, throw on something that you enjoy, and just sit back, relax, and go to cutting. I can usually get through a good movie or a couple of episodes of the Andy Show or a bunch of music videos while I'm cutting my pattern. So you can multitask, you can entertain yourself, and just slowly, patiently follow along the lines and cut out your pattern piece. So I normally wouldn't stop. I would just keep going with my pattern pieces, but for the sake of the video, I'm going to stop with the one piece and show you just how it looks when it's cut out. So this is the front bodice piece. What that means is it's going to go here. So you can kind of tell the shape. This is like the boobage curve, and it'll go here. You might be asking yourself, well, that's just one half. This specific pattern piece calls for you to cut it on a folded line. That's what these little arrows are for. See the arrow, how it goes in, up, and back in? And then if you read it on the side, it says center fold. What that means is your fabric will most likely come folded in half, and it's going to ask you to cut it on the fold. So where the fabric is folded over, that's where this piece will go, so that when you open it up, you'll have a full piece that goes across the front. And it just won't have that weird seam down the middle if you were to cut two of those instead of one solid piece. So then you're probably asking, how do I know how many of these pieces to cut? Well, it depends on the piece, but for this one, it tells you right here, cut one on fold of fabric, and then down here, cut one on fold of lining. So you're going to have your front piece, that's your front one, and then you're going to have the lining, that's the second piece. So altogether, you'll have cut this twice. Say you want a black dress and your lining's going to be orange, you would cut one piece out of black, one piece out of orange, both at the fold of the fabric. Now just for a little contrast, I'll show you the piece that I haven't cut yet, which is for number 2. It's pattern piece number 2, which is the side of the bodice. And for this one, it says cut 2 of fabric and cut 2 of lining. And then if you notice, there is no indication that you cut it on a fold. Of course, the information sheet also is a guidebook to how to put the dress together. And I'll just briefly show you this diagram. It comes with pictures and descriptions so that you don't get anything wrong. This is the front bodice piece that we just cut. And then the 2, it actually just goes 1, which is your front, and then your 2 side pieces are 2, and you'll just connect them. You see these little triangle things? These triangles right here? Let me show you those on the pattern. Explain what they are. So these little notches right here, most people like to either mark them with a pen, or they like to, when they're cutting the actual fabric, they like to cut it inverted. So they have an actual triangle in their pattern. So what is the triangle for? It's to match up your pattern pieces exactly. So for example, 1 and 2 would form a curve for the bust. See? There's 1s and 2s, and they match up. And then with this one, it actually has 2 different kinds of triangles, 2 triangles on one side, so you'd be able to match it up in 2 different places just to be sure you have the exact placement. So I think that just about covers it for your pattern basics and how to understand a pattern. So today we learned how to take our own measurements, we learned how to identify a pattern and identify our sizes on a pattern, we learned how to choose our pattern design, we learned how to pick the right fabric for our pattern, and we learned how to cut a pattern and understand some of the pattern basics. So if you would like a part 2 to this, where I actually show you how to cut pattern pieces out of fabric and how to put those pieces together, let me know down in the comments, and I will be more than happy to show you that. Also, like I mentioned before, I would be more than happy to take you to a fabric store and show you how to find the pattern envelopes, how to look everything up, just a basic how-to in a fabric shop. So if you want me to continue this and make a dress with you guys, I will. Just let me know down in the comments if you want me to go through the whole process, make a couple of videos, and actually make a dress with you, because I would be so happy to do that if it helps you at all. So let me know down in the comments if this video was of interest to you, if it was helpful, and what you would like to see from me in the future as far as sewing and patterns are concerned. So that was me explaining pattern basics. you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful. And I hope you come around again soon. Say bye. Bye. Calls for you to hold. And you're like, oh, cutting a pattern. Because and then the other thing in the, you gonna focus on me? Blurry party, yeah. So, tissue thin kind of since this one actually has a next to the highest point of the booby. Just give me a second. And put your thumbs where your